The night I found the documents hidden inside my husband's office safe, I realized something terrifying. The man who had spent the last year telling me he loved me had apparently been planning something behind my back. And the worst part? My name was written all over those papers. But I had no idea that what I was about to uncover would destroy my marriage, expose a shocking family secret, and change my life forever. Welcome back to the channel. If you enjoy emotional relationship stories, shocking betrayals, and powerful endings where the truth finally comes out, don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. Now, let's begin today's story. My name is Angelina. I'm 34 years old. And 1 year ago, I thought I had found the love of my life. His name was Robert. He was charming, handsome, intelligent, and most importantly, he made me feel safe. After several failed relationships, I honestly believed God had finally sent me the right person. We met at a charity event in Chicago. I was there representing my family's foundation. He was there as a guest speaker for a real estate company. I still remember the first thing he said to me. "You look like someone who's carrying the weight of the world." I laughed. "And you look like someone who enjoys analyzing strangers." He smiled. "Only the beautiful ones." It was cheesy, but somehow it worked. Over the next few months, Robert became everything I had ever wanted. He sent flowers. He remembered small details. He called my mother on her birthday. He volunteered with my charity events. Everyone loved him, including me. Especially me. 6 months later, he proposed. Some people thought it happened too quickly, but when you're in love, warnings often sound like jealousy. My best friend Sophia even asked me, "Are you sure?" I laughed. About what? About him. At the time, I thought she was overthinking. Now, I wish I had listened. You see, there was one thing Robert didn't know when we first met. My family was wealthy. Very wealthy. Not billionaire wealthy, but comfortable enough that money had never been a problem. My late grandfather had built a successful logistics company, and before he died, he left most of his assets to me. Not because I was his favorite, but because I had spent years helping him run the family foundation. Still, I never talked about money. I preferred simple things. Simple clothes, simple cars, simple life. When Robert and I started dating, he assumed I worked a normal office job. And honestly, I let him believe that. Not because I wanted to lie, because I wanted someone to love me for me, not for my bank account. Months later, when he eventually discovered the truth, he appeared completely shocked. "Angelina, why didn't you tell me?" I shrugged. "I wanted to know whether someone could love me without knowing what I own." He pulled me into his arms. "I'd live in a cardboard box if I had you." At the time, I believed him. After our wedding, life seemed perfect. We bought a beautiful home. We traveled, we hosted family dinners, and everyone constantly told us how lucky we were. But after about 8 months, little things started changing. At first, I ignored them. Robert became strangely interested in legal matters. He started asking unusual questions. "What exactly did your grandfather leave you? Who inherits everything if something happens to you? Have you updated your will since we got married?" I assumed he was simply being responsible. After all, married couples discuss finances, right? But then his curiosity became obsession. He constantly asked about trusts, investments, insurance policies, properties, and every conversation somehow returned to one topic: my assets. One evening, I jokingly said, "You ask more questions about my lawyer than my favorite movie." He laughed. But something about that laugh felt forced. Still, I ignored the feeling. Because love makes excuses. About 2 months later, Robert suggested something unexpected. "Maybe we should combine everything financially." I smiled politely. "I prefer keeping some things separate." His expression changed for just a second. Only a second. But I noticed. Disappointment. He quickly recovered and kissed my forehead. "Whatever makes you happy." But that night, he barely spoke to me. A few weeks later, My lawyer, Mr. Harrison, called unexpectedly. Angelina, did you authorize changes to your estate documents? I nearly dropped my coffee. What changes? There was silence. Then he sounded confused. I received an email request last week. My stomach tightened. I never sent one. Mr. Harrison immediately apologized. That's strange. Whoever sent it had personal information. My heart started racing. But before I could ask more questions, he reassured me. Don't worry. I ignored it because I wanted verbal confirmation first. After hanging up, I tried convincing myself it was nothing. Maybe someone made a mistake. Maybe there was confusion. Maybe, but deep down, something felt wrong. That evening, I told Robert about the strange call, and for the first time since our marriage, he looked nervous. Not surprised, not concerned, nervous. That's weird, he quickly said. Probably spam. Then he immediately changed the subject, and that's when my instincts finally woke up. Because people who have nothing to hide don't rush to change conversations. Days later, Robert announced he had to travel for work. 3 days. Dallas. He kissed me goodbye. I love you. I love you too, I replied. But somehow, those words felt different now. The first day passed normally. The second day, I decided to clean his home office. Robert was extremely protective of that room. He always kept it locked. But before leaving for Dallas, he accidentally forgot his spare key inside the desk drawer. At first, I hesitated, because trust matters. But then I remembered Mr. Harrison's phone call, and something inside me whispered, something isn't right. I unlocked the office door. Everything looked ordinary. Books, computer, files, nothing unusual. Until I noticed a small black safe hidden behind a framed photograph. I froze, because I had never seen it before. And suddenly, I remembered watching Robert enter 4 numbers months earlier. His birthday. My hands trembled. I entered the code. The safe clicked open, and sitting inside was a thick folder. On the cover were 5 words that made my blood run cold. Angelina Estate Transfer Plan. My entire world stopped, and as I slowly opened the file, I realized I had absolutely no idea who my husband really was. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the folder. For several seconds, I just stared at the words written across the cover. Angelina Estate Transfer Plan. My heart pounded inside my chest. There had to be an explanation. There had to be, because the alternative was unthinkable. I slowly opened the folder, and what I found inside made my blood run cold. The first document was a copy of my estate records. The second contained details about my trust fund. The third listed every property I owned. But then I noticed handwritten notes in the margins. And those notes weren't written by my lawyer. They were written by Robert. Need access after amendment. Confirm beneficiary changes. Timing is important. I suddenly felt sick. This couldn't be real. I flipped to the next page, and that's when I found emails. Printed emails. Dozens of them. Robert had been communicating with someone named Daniel Mercer. At first, I assumed Daniel was a financial advisor, until I read one sentence. Once the documents are updated, she won't even realize what's happened. My stomach dropped. I quickly turned the page. Another email. Marriage gives us credibility. Stay patient. Marriage gives us credibility. Those 5 words echoed in my mind. No, 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 no. I sat down because my legs no longer felt strong enough to support me. For an entire year, this man had slept beside me, held my hand, told me he loved me. And now I was looking at evidence suggesting that everything might have been a lie. But then something strange caught my attention. The email stopped abruptly 3 months earlier. Why? And who exactly was Daniel Mercer? I grabbed my phone and searched his name. Within seconds, his profile appeared. Attorney, asset consultant, Chicago. But something else immediately stood out. His photograph? I had seen him before. At our wedding, standing beside Robert. At the time, Robert had introduced him as an old college friend. Not an attorney, not an advisor, a friend. My chest tightened. Had everyone known? Had I been the only person living in a fantasy? Then I heard something fall from inside the safe. A smaller envelope had slipped behind the shelf. I picked it up. It was sealed, and written across the front were the words, "Confidential, do not open until necessary." I hesitated, then slowly opened it. Inside was a private investigator's report, and suddenly, nothing made sense anymore because the report wasn't about me, it was about Robert. Page after page described his past relationships, his financial history, his debts, and even worse, 2 previous engagements. Both women had ended their relationships with him shortly before marriage. One sentence nearly stopped my heart. Subject demonstrates repeated patterns of financial dependency and manipulation. I covered my mouth. This report had been created almost 2 years ago, months before Robert and I got married. But who ordered it? I kept reading, and finally found the answer. At the bottom of the last page was one name, Sophia Bennett, my best friend. I froze. Sophia? The same Sophia who had asked me, "Are you sure about him?" Suddenly, memories came flooding back. The awkward conversations, the concern in her eyes, the questions I had dismissed, and then I remembered something painful. 3 weeks before my wedding, Sophia and I had argued. She begged me to slow down. I accused her of being jealous. And after that fight, we stopped speaking. Tears filled my eyes. My best friend had tried to protect me, and I had pushed her away. At that moment, my phone rang. Robert, my entire body tensed. I watched his name appear on the screen. For several seconds, I couldn't answer. Finally, I picked up. "Hey, sweetheart," he said cheerfully. "I miss you." Those words made me feel physically ill, because now I didn't know what was real anymore. "I miss you too," I lied. Then I asked carefully, "How's Dallas?" Silence. Just for a second. Then he answered, "Busy." Something felt wrong. Very wrong. Because I suddenly remembered something. Earlier that day, when I was cleaning his office, I had accidentally seen his flight itinerary on the desk. And according to the paper, he wasn't in Dallas. He was supposed to be in Boston. Why would he lie about something so simple? After we hung up, I immediately opened our shared location app, and my heart nearly stopped. Robert wasn't in Dallas. He wasn't in Boston. He was still in Chicago, less than 15 miles away. My hands started shaking again. If he wasn't traveling, then where was he? And more importantly, who was he with? Without thinking, I grabbed my keys and drove across town. The location led me to a luxury restaurant downtown. I parked across the street, and then I saw him, Robert, sitting at a table, laughing, with Daniel Mercer, the attorney from the emails. But they weren't alone, because sitting across from them was someone I never expected to see again. Sophia, my best friend, the woman I hadn't spoken to in over a year, and the moment I saw her reach into her purse and place a thick envelope on the table, I thought I had just witnessed the ultimate betrayal. I had no idea that the truth was far more shocking than I imagined. From across the street, I watched in disbelief. Robert, Daniel Mercer, and Sophia, the 3 people connected to the biggest mystery in my life, were sitting together at the same table. My hands tightened around the steering wheel. I felt sick, angry, heartbroken, and honestly humiliated, because in that moment I believed I had been betrayed by 2 people, my husband and my best friend. Then I saw Sophia remove a large envelope from her purse and slide it toward Daniel. Robert looked serious. Daniel opened the envelope, and suddenly all 3 of them started talking intensely. That was it. I couldn't take it anymore. Without thinking, I got out of the car and crossed the street. I barely remember walking into the restaurant. People turned and stared, but I didn't care. My entire world was collapsing. When I reached the table, Robert's face turned white. "Angelina?" Sophia looked equally shocked, but I wasn't interested in explanations. Not anymore. I threw the folder I had found inside the safe directly onto the table. "What is this?" The entire restaurant fell silent. Robert stood up. "Angelina, please." "No." I could feel tears running down my face. "You lied to me. You lied about Dallas. You lied about Daniel. And apparently everyone except me knew what was happening." Sophia slowly stood up. "Angelina, please sit down," I laughed bitterly. "After 1 year of silence, that's what you say." Robert looked devastated. But at that moment I didn't care. Then something unexpected happened. Sophia began crying, actual tears. Not fake tears, real tears. Angelina, I never betrayed you. I shook my head. Really? Then explain this. I pointed toward Daniel. Sophia looked at him, then back at me and quietly said, Daniel isn't helping Robert. He's helping me. I froze. What? Daniel slowly stood up. Mrs. Parker, perhaps we should speak privately. But I crossed my arms. No. I've had enough secrets. For several seconds nobody spoke. Then Robert reached inside his jacket and removed something. A photograph. He handed it to me. At first I didn't understand. Then I looked closer. And suddenly, I couldn't breathe. It was a picture of me. Taken 6 months earlier. Standing outside our charity foundation. But written underneath the photograph were the words, potential target, active investigation. My heart nearly stopped. What is this? Robert looked exhausted. Everything you found in the safe wasn't a plan against you. It was a plan to protect you. I stared at him. What? Daniel spoke calmly. Your grandfather's company made powerful enemies over the years. Recently, someone attempted to gain access to your assets. I felt completely lost. But the emails, Daniel nodded. We created fake language intentionally because we suspected someone inside the company was spying on communications. Sophia finally spoke. The person spying wasn't Robert. It was someone else. I looked at Robert. Then why hide everything from me? His eyes filled with tears. Because I promised your grandfather. I blinked. My grandfather died 6 years ago. Robert nodded slowly. Before he passed away, he hired Daniel and asked him to monitor certain legal issues. My mind couldn't process any of it. Then Robert quietly added, and 6 months before I met you, I met your grandfather. I stared at him. Impossible. That's not possible. He was already sick. Robert nodded. He knew he was dying. He wanted to make sure you'd be safe. Then Daniel reached inside his briefcase and handed me another envelope. This one looked old. Very old. Across the front, written in familiar handwriting, were 2 words. For Angelina. My knees almost gave out. Because I recognized the handwriting immediately. Grandpa. With trembling fingers, I opened the envelope. Inside was a letter, and as soon as I read the first sentence, I burst into tears. My precious Angelina. If you're reading this, then Robert has proven himself worthy of your trust. I looked up in shock. Robert was crying too. The letter continued. He doesn't know this yet, but I chose him long before you did. I stared at Robert. What? Robert nodded through tears. Your grandfather and I met through charity work. He became my mentor, and after months of knowing him, he made me promise something. What promise? Robert smiled sadly. To protect you. My entire body went numb. The letter continued. Angelina, wealth attracts dangerous people. I fear that after I'm gone, some individuals may try to use you. Robert has a good heart. If life brings the 2 of you together naturally, don't push him away, but if he ever stops loving you, tell him I'll haunt him personally, despite everything. I laughed through tears. That sounded exactly like Grandpa. Sophia wiped her eyes. Angelina, that's why I investigated Robert. I wanted to protect you. When I discovered your grandfather already knew him, I stopped worrying. I looked at Robert. Then why were you asking so many questions about my estate? He sighed. Because someone inside your company had already attempted fraud, and Daniel believed your legal documents needed updating. Suddenly, everything made sense. The safe, the emails, the secrecy, even Dallas. Except one thing, I frowned. You lied about Dallas. Robert exchanged glances with Daniel. Then Daniel quietly said, because we finally discovered who was trying to steal your assets. My heart stopped. Who? And when Robert answered, I felt my entire world collapse again. Because the person behind everything was a member of my own family. For several seconds I simply stared at Robert. My voice barely worked. Who? Robert looked devastated. Daniel lowered his eyes. Sophia quietly reached for my hand. And then Robert said the last name I ever expected to hear. Your uncle, Victor. I froze. No, not Uncle Victor. Not the man who had practically helped raise me after Grandpa passed away. Not the man who always brought gifts on birthdays. Not the man who called me princess since I was a little girl. Anyone but him. Robert slowly nodded. I'm sorry. I felt dizzy. There has to be some mistake. Daniel opened his briefcase and handed me another file. Unlike the documents I had found in Robert's safe, these were official investigation reports. Bank transfers, emails, shell companies, forged signatures. Everything pointed to one person, Victor Parker, my uncle. And according to the evidence, he had been trying to gain access to my grandfather's remaining assets for almost 3 years. 3 years. 3 years of deception. 3 years of pretending to be family. I covered my mouth. Why? Daniel sighed. Debt. Heavy debt. Your uncle invested in several failed business ventures. And when creditors started pressuring him, he became desperate, Sophia softly added. He thought your inheritance would solve everything. Tears rolled down my cheeks. Because money had destroyed another family. Or maybe it simply revealed who people truly were. Suddenly, I remembered something. 3 years earlier, Uncle Victor had encouraged me to sign several financial documents. At the time, he claimed they were routine paperwork. Thank God my lawyer had insisted on reviewing everything first. Otherwise, I might have lost everything without ever realizing it. Robert looked at me carefully. Angelina, there's more. My stomach sank. More. How could there possibly be more? He took a deep breath. Victor wasn't acting alone. Those words hit me like lightning. No, Robert slowly nodded. I'm afraid so. My mind raced through every member of the family. And then he said another name. Catherine, my aunt, Victor's wife. The woman who baked cookies every Christmas. The woman who hugged me after Grandpa died. The woman I trusted completely. I burst into tears. Not because of the money. Because betrayal hurts more when it comes from people you love. For nearly an hour, Daniel explained everything. Victor and Catherine had created fake companies. They planned to manipulate estate documents. And eventually, they hoped to gain legal control over several properties. But thanks to Grandpa's old instructions, Robert and Daniel had been quietly monitoring suspicious activity. And when the fraud attempts increased, they started gathering evidence. That's why Robert had been acting strangely. That's why he kept asking questions. That's why he lied about Dallas. Because he wasn't in Dallas. He had been meeting investigators in Chicago, protecting me. The very thing I had accused him of failing to do. I looked at my husband, the man I had doubted, the man I almost stopped loving, and suddenly I started crying all over again. I'm sorry. Robert immediately wrapped his arms around me. You don't have to apologize. Anyone would have believed what you believed. But I should have trusted you enough to tell you the truth. For the first time that night, we both understood something important. Secrets, even good secrets, can damage relationships. Trust requires honesty. And honesty requires courage. 2 months later, federal investigators officially filed charges. When Victor realized the evidence against him was overwhelming, he confessed. What broke my heart most wasn't his confession. It was what he said afterward. I never wanted to hurt you, I just needed money, but sometimes people do terrible things while convincing themselves they have good reasons. Catherine eventually admitted everything too. Neither of them went to prison because of plea agreements and health conditions. But they lost nearly everything. And more importantly, they lost their family. I never hated them, but I couldn't trust them anymore. Some wounds heal, others leave scars. 6 months later, I finally reunited with Sophia properly. We spent 6 hours talking, laughing, crying, and apologizing. Turns out, my best friend had never abandoned me. I had simply stopped listening. One evening she smiled and said, You know, I almost tackled you at the restaurant. I laughed. You probably should have. We both burst out laughing, and for the first time in over a year, I had my best friend back. As for Robert, I fell in love with him all over again. Not because he was perfect, because he wasn't, but because real love isn't about perfection. It's about choosing each other even after life becomes complicated. Last year, we celebrated our second wedding anniversary, and Robert gave me a framed photograph of Grandpa. Below the picture was one of Grandpa's favorite sayings: "Money reveals character. Love reveals the heart." Every day I look at those words, because they're true. Money didn't destroy my family. Greed did. And love didn't make my marriage perfect. Trust did. People often ask me whether I regret marrying Robert. My answer is always the same: no. Because sometimes life tests the people who truly belong in your story. And when the storm finally passes, you discover who stayed beside you. My husband said he loved me, and in the end, he proved it. The end.